Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this Friday, the 18th of February, 2022. I'll tell you guys what. I've told you guys a story about the fire ants when I was just a little kid. There's this guy, I've told this story before, but some of you probably haven't heard it. There was this place that was auctioning off cars. And there was men there. I was just a kid at the time, and they used to have this big school bus that drive through this big car lot to sell these cars at auction. And the men, when they were bidding on a car, their mind would be focused on what they're doing, very much so. Now, I was on the school bus, rode around in the yard. They had the school bus with a big mega horn on it, and it had bleacher seats in it, and they cut the whole side of the school bus out. Put seats in there, and they'd face the seats in the opposite direction, like an audience, like a traveling audience, like a traveling sideshow was. And down at the foot of the base of the school bus there, they had these big kegs loaded with ice, full of all different kinds of soda pops and potato chips and hot dogs and donuts and everything else. And me as a kid, that was big thing for me, ride around in the school bus and eat this stuff, while all these guys were out in the yard there bidding on these cars. So it was a swampy place where they had all these cars, and down in Florida. And the thing is there was these fire ant nests all over the place. They're big mounds, fire ants inside them. So there's this guy, he went over and I saw what was happening, but you couldn't say anything or do anything when they're doing this bidding, because it's like everybody be quiet while they're doing the bidding or whatever, and the auctioneer, he was like, you know how they do, $50, $100, do I hear $200, on, I noticed this one guy out there, his foot was right in the middle of a fire ant's nest. I was watching him. I knew something was going to happen. Yeah, sure enough, the fire ants stung him. But the thing about fire ants is they'll all crawl. Hundreds and thousands of them will be crawling up your pant legs. And they won't bite. You won't even feel them. Until they get up to a certain point. You got like 1 million of them in there. In your pants. Ants in your pants. You ever heard the old saying, he's got ants in his pants? And then all of a sudden they'll all bite at once. Well, how do they perform that little feat, that little miracle of them all biting at once, like they're all in communication with one another? Well, it's a tiny little smell that comes off of them when they bite. When the first one bites, he puts this smell off. That smell is called a pheromone. And that smell is the signal to the others. When they smell that, then they bite too. And of course, then they release the smell. And then the next one bites. And then they all bite at once, practically, because there's communication there. Humanity has a communication, too. Just like a hive of bees is the same way. A hive functions as a hive. Humanity, our brains function with something called brain waves. Somebody goes to the hospital, and they were in a car accident or whatever. One of the things that they'll check is to see if there's brainwave function. These brainwaves come in different, named according to like beta, gamma, delta, and so on. That's what brainwaves are named after. But these are according to the frequencies of the brainwaves. And as your brain is in a certain state of like awakeness is one frequency, and when you're asleep it's a different frequency, and so on. Different frequencies, radio wave frequencies. The thing about radio waves is they don't cease to exist as they travel through time-space. It's just a matter of how powerful a receiver you have. You can receive brainwaves outside the human skull if you've got a powerful enough receiver. And so humanity is connected. We're all living under one enormous biosphere called the Earth. You know, we're all breathing the same air. We are connected. The problem there is there's narratives out there. The structured belief systems that are being spun, and people are not going to believe in these belief systems unless they have some truth mixed in with them. If a narrative gets too far off the beaten track where it's all lies, people will start to see through it. Narratives have to have a certain amount of truth in them. What's the problem right now with society is we're all believing different narratives. People in Russia over there are believing a certain narrative about NATO. The people on the NATO side are believing a certain narrative about Russia. Over here in the United States, we have, in Canada, we have people believing in a conservative narrative. Some people are believing in. Other people are believing in a liberal narrative. Here in Canada, in the United States, it's called Democrats and Republican narrative. These are all narratives being spun all around the world. There's different narratives in different places that people believe. And like I said, all of these narratives have to have a certain amount of truth mixed in with them. Until humanity comes to the realization that we are all under the same biosphere together and starts to think for themselves in a critical way, critical thinking, well, I'm afraid we could end up being doomed. And let's get the charts open and let's take a look at some of this, what I'm saying, doomed. Let's start the charts right here. And let's take a look at this. A third world war. How a nuclear war between the United States and Russia could play out, or would play, or U.S. and Russia, how would it play out? In other words, this is what would happen, okay? This is a Princeton University simulation of this, and in the first strike, right here, there would be 2.6 million casualties. It says, according to Princeton simulation, Russia would attack first with approximately 300 nuclear warheads and short-range missiles. Striking NATO bases and troops, NATO would respond with around 180 warheads carried by aircraft over Russian objectives. Casualties, 2.6 million in the span of 3 hours. The second strike would then come, and it would be 3.4 million casualties. And it would be launches from other countries, launching here, there, and everywhere. Look at the globe, just poof, 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 poof. That would be the second strike. And then there's a third strike. This is the third step. It's called total annihilation. It says NATO and Russia, following the scenario elaborated by Princeton University, would launch attacks on important economic and population centers to hamper the other side's recovery. So we don't even want to recover anymore. We just want to hamper that recovery because of our narratives, because of our structured belief systems that have truths mixed in with them, that divide and separate us. It says 5 to 10 nuclear warheads would be used for each city. Thermonuclear warfare would kill 85.3 million people in the first 45 minutes. So, what we're looking at here is we're looking at 57.4 million wounded within the first 4 to 5 hours. So, basically, everything would just be a burnt-out husk on the earth. So then the survivors, what would happen to them? Well, there's roughly 440 sprinkled all around the earth, here, there, and everywhere, especially in the northern hemisphere, mostly in the northern hemisphere. Nuclear power plants. They need to be tended. Now, if you guys know about a nuclear power plant, what it is they got all kinds of valves in there and switches and buttons, and they turn the valves on, they turn the valves off with time switches and everything else, and they have to have the power running in order to run the pumps to keep the... You can't put out a nuclear reactor. You just can't switch it off like a light bulb. It doesn't work that way. You turn it off and it keeps running. They have to be what's called decommissioned or deactivated, and that takes time. The rods have to be removed and stuff from them. But if you don't do that, if it's a running nuclear power plant, like the 440 nuclear power plants they have out there, each could be a potential not Hiroshima, but each could be a potential, what was that big one that happened in Russia there, or Fukushima, or we've had a couple of them happen, meltdowns. 440 of them out there, and they all need to be serviced. Well, tell me, how do the people that service the nuclear power plants if we just had a nuclear strike? How do they get into work? Or would they even be able to get into work because they might not even be alive? If you don't service those things, they go into what's called critical mass. They start to produce heat and they start to melt, and it's called the China syndrome, where they melt down into the Earth's core and they spew up radioactivity for God knows how long. If you don't have any containment crews in there when that's happening, that radioactivity will spew up into the atmosphere and circle the Earth. Okay? So we got 440 of them, potential Fukushimas. All over here, there, and everywhere. What were we thinking? But that's just besides the point now. So basically what it would do is it would completely pollute the northern hemisphere and create a nuclear winter where the northern hemisphere become too cold to live. So for the survivors, as their hair's falling out and their teeth falling out and their gums are bleeding, from the nuclear radiation, it would make the northern hemisphere pretty much no life left in the northern hemisphere. Now, there is possibly a few places around the equator on the Earth, in the toward the southern hemisphere, where people might survive this if they have a nuclear. But it's going to be difficult. Life would be very difficult for those ones. And what about subsequent generations, though? Because I guarantee you the amount of radioactivity that those people would receive, even in the southern hemisphere, would render them probably sterile. So we're probably looking at, if we have a nuclear war, we're probably looking at less than 100 years before there is no human species anymore. In other words, we are extinct. We would extinct ourselves. And what would extinct us is these stupid narratives we believe. We got to quit believing the narratives, and we got to start thinking for ourselves. Each and one of us individually start thinking for ourselves and stop this insanity that we're in right now. Anyway, I got to get into the markets. I've talked about this enough. This is a depressing subject, but it has to be said that people become so involved in these stupid narratives that they'll actually give up their life. They'll give up their freedom. They'll give up because they believe in the narrative. They start to actually believe in the narratives that are being spun by these ones who are out there spinning these. Basically, they're like a tale. A narrative is like a tale. It's mixed with truth, but it's pushing people in a certain direction that the narrative wants them to go in. We need to start thinking for ourselves individually and stop believing in a bunch of half-truths that are mixed in with some of these narratives. We need to critically examine the narrative. Just don't believe it because, hey, it's got some truth mixed in with it. Because we're being manipulated on a grand scale toward our own destruction. And, anyway, let's get into the markets. Let's take a look at today and see what's going on. We're looking at silver price at $23.91. It's up 10 cents on the day so far. $23.91 for silver. silver and gold are starting to look really good. And you know the reason why? Inflation is a lot of it. It's playing a big part of it. Starting to drive the price up on gold and silver. It's starting to lose control. The Federal Reserve's starting to lose control of the system right now. And yeah, they're all going to try to find ways out to squiggle out of these things, to focus our attention elsewhere. Snake charmers do that, you know? Like they'll have a big cobra in a bag or whatever, and they'll bring the cobra out. And what they do is they'll wiggle their hand over this way, and the cobra starts looking at their hand. Meanwhile, the other hand is slipping in behind their neck to grab the cobra by the neck. It's called diverting their attention away. And that's one of the things that they've used war for through history, is divert attention away from what they're doing over here. Don't look over here while we're doing this over there. But the problem is these smarties who are out there, these cunning ones out there, these unjust ones I talked about yesterday in the program, who are spinning these narratives and getting us all confused so that we'll follow this narrative or that narrative and we don't even know which way we're going anymore. They'll get caught. They could get caught in their own trap. If they're not careful, they could be living on a world where radiation is falling down on their head and their teeth are falling out and their gums are I don't care. They're not exempt. Maybe some of them are so powerful they think, okay, we've got our underground base and everything else. You know, we've all bought into some sort of we got an underground whatever, you know, place we can go in case there's a nuclear war, and they feel invulnerable. Well, they better be prepared to stay underneath the ground indefinitely. Do they got an air supply that's going to last indefinitely? Do they got a food supply that's going to last indefinitely? And what's their life going to be like under the ground permanently? Because that's what they could end up doing to themselves. Every time they come up to the surface, they have to take a Geiger counter with them. What kind of a life is that? And then they say, oh, well, we can't stay up here much longer. We got a 10-minute time limit up here on the surface. We got to go down below again. You know, oh, we're running out of food down there. How long we been down there? 3 years now. Oh, yeah, we're running out of food. Our food's all stale. Oh, and our exhaust system isn't working properly, and the air down there is terrible, and there's moisture down there, and we got mold growing, black mold growing near my bed, you know, and what kind of a life is this? I got something I need medical attention for, and there's no hospitals anymore, and what kind of a life is that if they decide to blow the world up, even if they do survive in their underground bunker? Have they thought this through? These maniacs that would start World War III, have they thought this through really well, you know? I mean, this is one of those things where this is the time now to think it through, rather than say, hey, you know, I got my underground bunker, let them start World War III or whatever. So I'm talking about some of these rich mucky mucks out there who are pulling strings and creating these narratives for all the rest of us. You know, there's always a beginning to something. These narratives out there have a creator. Gosh knows, you know. I think that, anyway, I don't know how I get into that again. Okay, guys, silver price today. It's about $24. It's $23.93. Bid and ask is $24.03, and we're looking at up 12 cents. So we got pushers and drivers for gold and silver now. Inflation's tremendous good driver. Gold today is down $8.10, but I wouldn't expect it to stay down too long. It's at $18.91. Let's take a look at crypto today. Refresh the page, 1815, and we're looking at a Bitcoin price of 39,927. So Bitcoin's broken down again under the $40,000 mark. Is there, well, you know, anyway, I talk so much I've run out of steam a little bit. Let's take a look now at the Dow Jones Industrial Average today. It's down 80 points again today, so it's still on this downward slip. Okay, let's take a look now at crude oil at $90.33, and it's down 83 cents on the day. So everything's a little bit bearish, a little bit negative here, you know, and it's going to be when you consider what the Fed's threatening to do. Again, the Fed's following their own little narrative that they have, and we're following another narrative about the Fed. You know, it's just like everybody got their own little thing that they're believing, and this causes divisions in the world. These divisions grow strong enough, they reach critical mass, and poof, they explode on us. So let's take a look now at the MOVE index today at 96.17, and the MOVE index is going up a little bit. See, this is the thing about me. I try not to get involved and believe these narratives, but it's difficult. Because these narratives are presented in a way that comes out in front of you like a piece of ice cream. Like, are you going to have some ice cream? This slid out on the table. You suck up that narrative like eating the ice cream, you know? It's easy. It goes down smooth and everything, and it tastes good, you know, the narrative. Doesn't matter whether you're believing the left-wing narrative or the right-wing narrative or whatever narrative. Those are the two big ones right now here in North America, is these left-wing and right-wing narratives. It doesn't matter what the narrative is. You're buying into these things. And yeah, they're going to mix a little bit of sugaring with it, a little bit of truthing with it, of course. How else are they going to hook you? You're like the fish, you know. He gets the hook in his mouth with the narrative. They're going to hook you on these narratives. And I get a little bit, what do you call it, by these narratives too. A little bit hooked into them and stuff. And I have to sit down and I have to think critically and say, why you believe in this crap? I have to say to myself, you know, don't get involved in this stuff, because this is the reason why not to get involved in it and not to believe the narrative is because these narratives are what breaking humanity apart. We're all together under this same sphere called the Earth. We're stuck here. We're all breathing the same air. And these narratives are divisive. They're breaking us down. They're separating us and dividing us into groups that will fight against one another. And do we really want to be extinct? Because this is the path to go down. Let's take bonds and rates today. Bonds and rates today, we're looking at yields falling today on the long end, and we're looking at 1.93 on the US 10-year. And we're looking at the 30-year at 2.26. And it's a fairly substantial drop in yields. Now we're going to take a look at the dollar index, 96.05, and it's rising today a little bit, slowly. Thank you guys for listening to my show. Excuse me. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. And remember, think for yourselves. Don't just, if somebody comes along and they spiel off a narrative to you, say to yourself, critically analyze that, and before you start sucking that hook down your throat like a fish, start thinking to yourself, hey, you know, what do I really believe about all these things? Just don't accept everything, is what I'm saying, that you're told as being gospel truth. Anyway, we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.